Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our spiritual gathering on this February morning. We call ourselves SSUC Edmonton and SSUC Saskatoon, which is Southminster Steiner United Church, or Spiritual Seekers United in Community. And we strive to be a safe and welcoming community, as our sign says, to all sizes, all ages, all colors, all cultures, all genders, all sexualities, all religions, or none, as Charles told us, all types and all people. And so whether you've been a part of this circle since Southminster Steiner United Church first came together as a community, or whether you've been a part of this circle for a few years, or for a few months, or perhaps you're here today as a first-time visitor to this circle, or perhaps you've joined us this morning through the wonders of technology and live streaming from Saskatoon or some other place. You're all part of our ever-widening community. And know that on this day, you belong here. You're welcome here. My name is Nell Owens, and I'll be offering leadership this morning to enable Chris to have some family time away and to enable Nancy also to meet another commitment elsewhere. And so I look forward to sharing the next hour or so with you and hope that we'll find ourselves here in a place that enables us to enjoy some fellowship together, to sing, to pray, to hear ancient and contemporary words of wisdom, and to reflect on what those stories might mean for us in this time and in our place. We honor the land that we gather on this morning and acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux peoples. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked this land for generations. I just don't want you to hear me singing, so I turn it off in between. We'll take time now to quiet our voices and our hands and our minds and our hearts. And by our presence here, we make of this space a sacred circle, where we bring our own spirituality into the spirituality present of all who gather here on this day, and all who gather in spiritual communities in this city and in this province, and in this country and in the world on this morning. We're all part of the circle, and we draw our energy into the center, symbolized by the light. So we'll move now to a time for all ages, and I have a lovely book to share. So whoever wants to come and see the pictures close up, here. Oh, somebody's not happy. I feel like that some mornings too. Monday mornings in particular? Could be, yeah. All right. So today we have a book that's about change. And do you ever have things change in your life?
Yes.
What could change in your life?
Day, night.
Day and night, good time, weather. What about a change like, you think you're going to have macaroni for supper and you get to the table and you're having soup? Would that be a change?
That'd be a very weird change.
That would be a weird change, wouldn't it? So sometimes things change in our life, and this book is about a cat who has something changing in the cat's life. Can you see it from where you are? The big pictures are up on the screen if you want to see there. This book is called The King Cat, and it's by Marta Altas. Let's see what it says. Well, let's read the back cover too. A cat's life isn't always easy. One day you're king of the house, and then everything changes. See what happens here. I am a cat, and I am the king of this house. I do so much for my people. I keep them entertained, and I sleep in the day so I can protect them at night. All I ask for in return is some help to relax every now and then. I am such a good king. And I'm super cute. But something happened this morning. I don't know what. But I must have done something to upset my people. If not, why, oh why, would they have done this to me? A dog. Nobody even asked for my opinion. A goldfish would have been okay, but a dog? Dogs are annoying. Dogs are strange. Dogs are disgusting. And let's be honest, dogs are quite stupid. But as I am such a good king, I have given him a proper welcome. But he doesn't seem to understand the rules of my house. And it looks like everyone else has forgotten, too. I don't understand. Don't they love me anymore? Could it be true? No. Okay, enough. I am still the king of this house, and I don't want you here. I don't want... There goes the dog.
It's changing what?
It's changing, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, good. Bye-bye. It worked. Finally, everything is back to normal. Nice and quiet. But is it too quiet? I suppose my rules are back. No, they are not. But that's okay. We can make some new rules. We'll make them both together, as long as he knows I'm still the king. And that's the end of that story. So things changed for the cat, but in the end, did it work out? Did it work out in the end? I think so. The cat was able to adapt to the change. So that's the story for today. Now we have people to go to the preschool. Well, this morning we're going to be considering the idea of transition, of change, of remembering some of what we have experienced in our lives and how we remember those times, of considering what words and which ways we might take with us into transition. Now, I'm thinking that as a group here, we can start out by developing a bit of a mosaic of our own experience with times of transition, and that will help bring the discussion out of the abstract into the reality of our daily lives. So no matter who we are, and no matter what we've done, we've all, by virtue of just living our lives, been caught up in transition and change of one kind or another. So, if you've experienced a transition in your life that you're willing to share, I'm going to invite you to do that now. And I'll ask you to be brief. Just give us approximately what time of life we're talking about, the type of transition that's come to mind for you, and what word or feeling you are associating with that transition. So I'll start. After high school, I left my life growing up in central Alberta, and I moved to the Netherlands to live and work for a year. And the word that I would associate with that transition is culture shock. So just one sentence, that's all we need, and so then we'll build up a bit of a mosaic of what transition can look like, and of course we might not have time to hear everyone's story. So who has something about transition?
When I was 45, I separated from my wife, and that caused a great transition in my life. And I was delighted to find that I had a supportive community in that process.
Thank you, Charles.
This is more recent. My children have left home, so it's empty nest syndrome.
Any others?
In our early 50s, we moved to Saudi Arabia, and actually my wife suggested I should go by myself. and she would see me when she came back.
When my daughters were still at university, I lost my partner, their dad, and it was pretty traumatic.
Big transition. We have one more? Okay, there we go.
I'm a newlywed. My wife and I got married last May 20th. We both had lost our spouses, Joya in 2011, me in 2014. And we had worked together at NAIT, but now we have a new life together.
Thank you. I see one more burning transition.
In 2009, I went back to school in northern New Mexico, and it changed my life forever. It was the best thing I ever did.
Now, I'm sure you all have other stories. There's probably lots of things going on in people's heads that they really didn't want to talk about. So all of these experiences of transition and of change bring words and feelings forward in us, and they're ways to express the reality of what's happened. Now we'll move to our first reading, and that's a poem by Niti Bhatt. Now, I suspect actually that the author of this poem would actually perform it as a rap, but I couldn't find that online, and I'm not going to do a rap, so I'm going to read it a bit more slowly for you. So, transition. Transition means change, from which you better not ask revenge. It's a culture of adapting, as swift as a boat rafting. It's the newness of a situation, accepted without frustration. It's a diplomatic decision, seen through pointed precision. It's the power of the old as its energy gets sold. Transition is a way of living. A loud bassoon hears when you're dreaming. Transition has answers to questions that have lost importance, which gain attention as you step out of your trance. Transition is the only constant in this ever-so-moving world current. This is the insight of a contemporary poet. May we find wisdom for our living. Our second reading is from the second book of Samuel in Hebrew Scriptures, chapter 12, verses 1 through 15. Now, 4 lives actually dominate this 2-volume narrative of 1st and 2nd Samuel, which we find in the ancient Hebrew Scriptures. And those are the lives of the characters Hannah, Samuel, Saul, and David. Now, chronologically, the stories are clustered around the year 1000 BCE, so it's sort of a millennial midpoint between the call of Abraham, sort of the father of the tribes of Israel, and then that was about 1,000 years before this story, and then 1,000 years later we get the birth of Jesus in Christian scripture. So that's kind of the timeline. And there's not a lot of explicit God talk in this cluster of interlocking stories, but the stories train us to perceive our own humanity. And so the biblical way then is to tell the story and then invite us to live into the story, to sort of say, this is what it looks like to be human. This is what's involved in maturing as a human being. But God was not at all pleased with what David had done and sent Nathan to David. So Nathan said to him, "There were 2 men in the same city, one rich, the other poor. The rich man had huge flocks of sheep, herds of cattle. The poor man had nothing but one little female lamb, which he had bought and raised. It grew up with him and his children as a member of the family. It ate off his plate, and drank from his cup and slept on his bed. It was like a daughter to him. One day, a traveler dropped in on the rich man. He was too stingy to take an animal from his own herds or flocks to make a meal for his visitor, so he took the poor man's lamb and prepared a meal to set before his guest. David exploded in anger. "As surely as God lives," he said to Nathan, "the man who did this ought to be lynched. He must repay for the lamb 4 times over for his crime and his stinginess." Nathan said, "You're the man. And here's what God, the God of Israel, has to say to you. I made you king over Israel. I freed you from the fist of Saul. I gave you your master's daughter and other wives to have and to hold. I gave you both Israel and Judah, and if that hadn't been enough, I'd have gladly thrown in much more. So why have you treated the word of God with brazen contempt, doing this great evil? You murdered Uriah the Hittite, then took his wife as your wife. Worse, you killed him with an Ammonite sword. And now, because you treated God with such contempt and took Uriah the Hittite's wife as your wife, killing and murder will continually plague your family. This is God speaking, remember. I'll make trouble for you out of your own family. I'll take your wives from right out in front of you. I'll give them to some neighbor, and he'll go to bed with them openly. You did your deed in secret. I'm doing mine with the whole country watching." Then David confessed to Nathan, "I've sinned against God." Nathan pronounced, "But yes, that's not the last word. God forgives your sin, you won't die for it. But because of your blasphemous behavior, the son born to you will die." And after Nathan went home, God afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he came down sick. This is an ancient story from Hebrew scriptures dating from around the year 1000 BCE. A brief video clip now that takes ancient words into our time and sets them to music. A number of years ago, my partner and I moved our family back to Alberta. Our previous home and pastoral charge had been in rural Saskatchewan, and we'd been called to serve in team ministry in a United Church pastoral charge not far from Edmonton. And so in between unpacking the boxes, we'd been able to look out of our new kitchen window, and there we could watch a farmer in a swathing machine slowly working his way around the field of canola that was behind our house. It was harvest time. A familiar rural grounding in a time of transition to a more urban life. We've already spoken of transition many times this morning, and so you have many examples before you and in your own heads. Transition, change, adapting to change. It's a strange and paradoxical fact that change is about the only constant in this life. Change can be hard It can be hard to live with. Whenever we come into a season of change, a time of transition, we know that it's always going to involve some kind of letting go, some kind of leaving something behind. Now, it may mean letting go of material things, or it may mean letting go of ways of doing things. It may mean letting go of people. Sometimes change comes to us just in the nature of things. Sometimes change is of our own choosing. Sometimes change comes to us from decisions that someone else makes. Sometimes change comes to us just from forces that are beyond our control. And sometimes change is almost incomprehensible in the grief that it can bring, as in the house fire in Halifax this past week that ended the lives of 7 children. An unimaginable transition that now has to be lived through by the parents and community of those children. Well, eventually, change also came to the field behind our new house, and it's a subdivision now with houses and a play park. Change comes to the church, too. And some will speak of transition, or they'll speak of an evolution of Christianity, and others use the kind of words that we embrace here at SSUC, such as naming ourselves an inclusive, affirming spiritual community exploring an expansive Christianity. And SSUC, through all its years of existence, has experienced its own kind of change and transition. And we have a commitment here in this place to engage in an emergent future, whatever that might look like. Well, if you've been here the last couple of weeks, or if you've been listening online, you'll know that Nancy and Chris just completed a lengthy series of reflections based on the values document that came to us from our friends at SSUC Saskatoon. And next week, when Chris and Nancy come back to us, they'll be transitioning to another series of reflections on another series of topics. So yet again, we're on the threshold of another change, another transition. Transition can be exhilarating. It can be exciting, but it can be hard and stressful as well. The letting go and the leaving behind process is not an easy one. But we can come to and live our way through all of the changes that come to us, trusting that there is one constant, that there is one unchanging love that grounds us in all times and all places. Part of the nature of the seasons of change that we move through is that the future is often unknowable and it's unpredictable for us. And so sometimes we just have to let go and simply trust that that love is there. So I'd like to offer you 4 words that you can carry along in love as you journey through the transitions in your life. So the first word is wisdom. Definition time. Wisdom, I think of the comprehension of what's true, coupled with an optimum judgment as to action. I'll repeat that. Wisdom is the comprehension of what's true, coupled with optimum judgment as to action. Wisdom comes to us in many forms, sometimes obvious and sometimes unexpected. Let me offer you a few words from the rap poem that we heard earlier, although you didn't hear it as a rap poem. But transition is a culture of adapting, as swift as a boat rafting. So can you hear in those words of poetry a comprehension of what's true? We know that transition, that change, demands a culture of adapting. We have experience with that. But consider also then this image of a boat rafting. Has anyone ever rafted down the river on a boat? Some people have. So does that help to bring home the idea of judgment and of action? Because depending on judgment and action, the rafters can negotiate safely down the river, or they could end up in a side channel, or they could end up in the river. And eventually, hopefully, they'll end up on shore with or without supplies, or they could end up in an unknown and possibly precarious situation. And wisdom sorts out what to do. Wisdom, comprehending what's happened, comprehending what's true, and then judging what action is needed to meet that transition and move forward. The second word to travel with us is courage. Now, we heard the story of the prophet Nathan from the second book of Samuel in the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, clearly, this is a political story around events that are going to accompany vast transitions of power in an ancient time. And instead of having a political discussion, now I'm going to suggest that you draw your own parallels to our current civic and provincial and federal and international political situations. There's lots of food for thought there. And so back to Nathan. Now, Nathan was a prophet. And prophets are found in all cultures and all civilizations. Prophets like Nathan use words to remake the world. See, when prophets find a world of moral rubble and spiritual disorder, prophets take up the work of words to rebuild what human chaos and mistrust have demolished. And as the words of those prophets enter the language of the communities, the men and women who live there, they find themselves drawn back to the essence of what was. What was their world before human chaos and mistrust demolished it? So as I said earlier, the biblical way, the way of the prophet, is to tell the story and invite us live into this. This is what it's like to be human. And Nathan, this prophet, who was such a minor prophet that he didn't even get his own book in the Hebrew Scriptures, Nathan got the job, as it were, of kind of, holding up the mirror, of confronting the most famous king in the history of the Hebrew people. And in the face of, I'm sure, fear and danger and uncertainty, Nathan confronted power with courage. Courage to face into the transition that was surely happening in his world. The third word is stillness. Stillness. Now, many religious traditions harbor the concept of a hermit figure, a person who seeks to live apart, often simply in seclusion from society, to make space in his or her daily life for the presence of whatever their understanding of God is: meditation, contemplation, prayer, self-awareness, personal development. So to make space to listen between the lines of the chatter of ordinary life. Many of you will remember Psalm 46 in the Hebrew Scripture. Be still and know that I am God. And then there's examples of Christian hermits. You may have heard of some of these. Saint Jerome in the 4th century in the Mediterranean. Sarah of the Desert in the 4th century in Egypt. Saint Benedict of Nursia, 6th century Italy. You've heard of Benedictines? Saint Benedict. Peter the Hermit, the 11th century in France. And of course, many of you will have heard of Mother Julian of Norwich, 15th century England. All Christian hermits. More modern Christian examples of hermits abound as well, such as Thomas Merton. Have you read the books of Thomas Merton? A few nods. And of course, there are many hermits historically of other religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, Taoism, Judaism. They all have their own history of a hermit-like figure. And of course, what of hermits in popular culture? The knight searching for the Holy Grail. Father Sergius, the Russian nobleman in the short story by Leo Tolstoy. The hermit Zarathustra, created by Friedrich Nietzsche. And what about Obi-Wan Kenobi? And Yoda of the Star Wars series. And of course, Luke Skywalker, who went into exile to live as a hermit. Like all of these biblical and religious and historical and cultural figures, we can take into the transitions of our lives a time and a place of stillness. And finally, the fourth word, abundance. Living in abundance, an abundant life. Now, I often think of the Jesus stories in relation to the word abundant. In so many of the Jesus stories, Jesus was trying to explain something to his disciples, to the people of his world and culture. Jesus tried to explain that there could be an alternate way of living that valued everyone in community. A way that would enable all of their lives to be more abundant in so many ways. Well, generally, as you know, his audience didn't get it. They didn't understand what Jesus was trying to tell them. But abundance, that dream of abundance, It's there for everyone to live into. We heard it in the Pete Seeger song in the video, a reinterpretation of the ancient words of the quaestor of Ecclesiastes in Hebrew Scripture. The seasons turn, and there is a time for every matter under heaven. And so we can carry all of this knowledge into the transition of our lives, transitions that we know will happen again and again and again. We can try to approach transition with wisdom, with courage, with stillness, and with that dream of abundance. Transition, adapting to change. It's when we are in transition that we are most fully alive. We turn now to strengthening our intentions through words of prayer, and these words are patterned after the prayer of Jesus. Let's speak them together. We open to the sacredness at the heart of all, called by many names. We open to deep mystery we trust to be love. May we be faithful to the vision of building a beloved community on earth. May there be daily bread to nourish all hunger, forgiveness for the harm we have done, and the capacity to forgive those who have hurt us. May we not feel abandoned in hard times, but find the strength to meet each moment and the wisdom to walk in the light of deep gratitude. For the light of love is with us now and forever. Amen. Friends, our time together is drawing to a close now. We've been together in community, have considered some of what we've experienced. We've considered some ancient and wise words, and considered some of what it means to be in transition, to experience transition, and to find words and ways to carry with us our lives into transition. Wisdom, courage, stillness, and abundance. And we return now to the light that symbolizes our community and the circle of spirituality which we have been to each other during this hour. And when we leave this place, we're witnesses not to the snuffing out of the light. Doesn't want to go out. But we're witnesses to the transformation of its energy, or we could say the transition of its energy into our energy that carries us forward into the world to seek justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly in love with all of creation. We walk forward into the world, into the cosmic mystery that's the universe around us.